and we welcome the panel. We have Catherine Webster from Kittiwake Solutions, we have Dermot O'Conneilla, the head of the Department of Tourism and Hospitality, GMIT, and we have John Fitzgerald from the Kennedy Rooms, and hosting we have our event host, Tina O'Dwyer.
So thanks very much, Catherine, Dermot and John, for coming. It's a little kind of shift in emphasis. We said building businesses and destinations that last, and I want to focus on the destination part of that because, in fairness, the last few speakers have spoken a lot about the business in particular. Catherine, when I say business destinations that last, what do you need to be thinking about?
Well, I think it starts with the businesses that are thriving in that destination, the communities that are thriving in that destination, and then the place itself. And if you have all those things working together, the visitor is going to have this amazing, memorable experience of the place. And it also means to me a few of those visionaries that Eugene was talking about that basically have no real regard for what is actually possible. And I think I think there have to be a few leaders like that in a destination to be able to make it sustainable. Leaders in the private sector.
Okay. You mentioned there the word sustainable. When we say sustainable, what do we mean?
There's two sides to sustainable, I guess. For any community, in particular in a rural setting, the community won't be viable unless there's economic sustainability for them in terms of employment and business prospects and so on. And then obviously there's the environmental sustainability side of things as well. If the community in a tourism setting is lucky enough to have high volume, the consideration then shifts to the environmental sustainability and carrying capacity of that destination and so on. But obviously, as Catherine has alluded to, without the economic sustainability, the community just won't exist really in the long term. And that's a very key consideration for any tourism operator in a rural setting. And it's a consideration that's come to the fore, particularly in, with the recent success of the Wild Atlantic Way. And I myself, living on the Wild Atlantic Way, have seen how it has definitely benefited even just the local shop. There's a lot more people who are now stopping in, and they're seeing the influence of increased tourism in their area where they wouldn't have had it before in such a short period of time. And it's making their businesses more economically sustainable into the future, and therefore they see themselves being more viable as part of that community into the future, and thinking of the next generation as being a part of that community essentially.
I know you yourself, your research areas in like community tourism and community-led tourism, and you're a native of the Aran Islands and still involved with tourism development there. What would say in terms of advocating a community-led approach, what does that mean for destinations that are thinking about that?
What comes to mind is an Irish outlook of Níart Cruile Chéile, which is the strength and unity. And for me, being from a rural community, it's a no-brainer really, in the sense that you're always going to have key drivers in the private sector, in the community. Eugene is a good example of it from the Doolin side. And we'd be very familiar with Eugene and the success from Doolin, being a native of Inishmore. You're always going to have a few key individuals who are drivers in their own sense. And I suppose the important aspect of community-led tourism planning and strategy is to get those key drivers, those key individuals together, along with influential community advocates and community representatives, and sharing a collective vision. And the key word then, if you manage to get these people together, is using legacy. What legacy do you wish for your community to have, 20, 30 years down the line? If you wish for the next generation to be part of that community, to attract them back into that community, to raise families. So legacy is the best way to approach it, because you ask yourself, how do we see our community in 30, 40 years down the road? And from that then you can set long-term goals. And by doing that then you can very easily then recognise what we need to do today in terms of what are the things that we need to do to try and achieve those things. So it's for me, it's a no-brainer in any rural community. All it takes is a couple of individuals to get together to start it. We have many examples of it right throughout the West Coast in particular.
On that, and I know exactly what you're saying about the no-brainer part of it when you think long-term. It's an industry that by its nature often thinks short-term. It thinks of the season, and it thinks of this year and the weather this year and all of that impact, and so getting them that way. And I guess one of the questions is back to KPIs, and they've been mentioned a lot today, your key performance indicators. How do you know it's working? What's your target, and how do you know? How do we measure the benefit of a community-led approach?
Yeah, I've struggled to find an economic argument against it. When I've looked at all of the examples that have been trialled and the ones that have succeeded. How do you measure it in the long term? There are models that one can use in a specific community. When I did my research, it was easy for an island because there's only, unless you're a good swimmer, there's only 2 ways to get out there. So it was easy to collect the information and to analyse it. But if you're a mainland destination, say on the west coast of Ireland, it's going to be a little bit trickier to do it yourself. But there was good news this year that they're finally incorporating the tourism satellite count as part of the national plan for tourism going forward. Which once that's up and running between Falls Ireland and CSO, they can then break it down to regional level, which eventually means that, we'll say in 5 or 6 years' time, if you're operating in the Burren, regionally we should be able to put a GDP contribution per capita from that region on tourism activity. If you have those kind of figures, you can go back to the department, you can go back to the minister, and you can argue for more infrastructural investment, more key training in the area of tourism and so on. And it shifts the focus of government on recognising tourism as a key industry as part of the overall economic activity of the country.
So quantifying the community activity in economic terms. It's interesting, I was in a destination that was trying at early stages of development, and their target was based around the number of children in the school. In the primary school. So the KPIs can change significantly. John, I know you're in the Kennedy Rooms in County Limerick, a relatively, not a very established tourism destination, but we've had a chat about agreeing with what Dermot says, but in terms of the day-to-day running of your business and making that sustain, is it actually relevant?
It's extremely relevant. One of the big challenges we have, because we're only there a year, and it's a 400,000 square foot convent school, old school, right? And it's 150 years of history, 1856 or something. So therefore, it had community involvement before we got there. And then it had 5 years of redundancy before we took it over as a kind of like an unused facility. So from the point of view of rebuilding it, like we're rebuilding it as an event centre, business hub. And that has to reconnect with all the community again. One of the, to take what you were saying here, one of the good and bad things that's happened is that the place was redundant for 5 years. If we had taken it over straight after the school had closed, there would have been a lot more negativity in the local community. But because they had 5 years of nothing, and this big, beautiful building falling down, they were saying, oh my God, we still want to come and take it. They were embracing us as soon as we walked in the door. And that's been a massive, massive help for us. From the point of view of actually driving the business and building the business, as I say, we were very young, we're a year old, but we have business already, and we've traded business. But our market is, go back to what you're saying, I mean, it's so important to know your customer and know your, someone else said they're not your customer, your visitor, right? It's to know your visitor. And that's what we're trying to do, is to absolutely understand our visitor. And because we're slightly off-piste, like we're not in a major tourist area, we're not in Clare, we're not in the west coast of Clare, we're in Bluff, in the middle of County Limerick, in the middle of Ballyhara. So we're trying to embrace and those elements, those positive elements that are out there to attract our customer. I mean, our primary customer is the Dermana. So when we took it on, right, the whole idea about a Dermana opening linked into us because we were trying to hit the 5-star market for off-site days, for gala dinners, etc., which is what we've been doing. But all of them at that level, 82% of our business has come from Dermana. So if you look at collaboration locally, that's our collaboration. And the rest of it has come because of Lockgar.
Okay.
Right? So the two little elements that we're trying to connect into, as well as the business hub as well, which we're renting out space at the old schoolrooms for small startup companies as an incubation hub to help companies get going. So we're trying to utilize the whole site and the whole facility. Now it has massive challenges, and we're only a year old, and we've done it all fast. And you go back to the community involvement side of it as well. So we kind of, what we did at the start, it's a very simple thing. We took over the place. We didn't touch the outside of the building, we didn't touch the gates, the walls, nothing. We worked inside. So for 8 months, nobody knew we were there until we started painting the outside, which we had big hoists and machinery and scaffolding, and everyone said, this was going on in the convent. So in actual fact, when people started nosing, if you like, coming in to knock on the door, they already had the inside done. Yeah. So we already had that wow element. We've got past it because we had gone through a process, and we didn't go for external funding, we didn't go for public funding. We did that first phase ourselves, discreetly, privately and quietly, which we launched last November. And since then we've had 3 gala dinners and 5 or 6 conferences and 4 or 5 meetings.
Brilliant. It's interesting because I know you're very you've spoken a lot about the figures and the profitability side of the business, and still I know it's central to that is this, you know, ease within the community, where the business is going to sit within the community. And I think Nuala particularly referred to that as well when she was speaking about putting down the roots into the community. But onto the profitability side of things, there was a quote doing the rounds this week from, I think it was Bill Gates, that, you know, busy is the new stupid, and to an extent I think Caroline was saying it as well, you know, that we count the numbers a lot. And as you were speaking, Caroline, I was going to recount the right numbers because our speakers were speaking about different numbers, not the visitor numbers, but the, you know, the number of the 0.8 that you had, Austin, that is your operating cost is turnover. Tell us about that. Or
Well, I call it, I call it an economic distraction.
okay.
That's what it is. I call it an economic distraction, because what it does is it distracts you away from where your core financial return is going to come from.
What's the distraction?
Anything else,
Okay.
right? That takes away from your energy and time that you're putting into developing your core business. And our core business is essentially 80% people who are 5-star staying in their manor. So if we get distracted from that, the other 20% or the community-based stuff doesn't happen. So it's quite simple. Like, we have to get that bit right first. And if we don't get that right, we're kind of going to be in 2 years' time we'll be gone.
Yeah.
So it goes back to it links into the whole sustainability thing. If we're not sustainable, and one other key element, because we're out off piece, let's say in Bruff, there's a new tourist element out there as well, which we discussed briefly last time. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of private small tour operators in minivans bringing families around the country. Right, we're doing afternoon teas for them. There's people that I know in the region we're in that don't even know these people are passing their door, and that's where, like, if you go back to if you get a coach load of 50 people versus a minivan with 5 people, that minivan for 5 people will give you as much revenue return as that coach if you attract it properly. And they're with a private driver, they're here for a week, they're touring around, they're selectively planning their trip way in advance, and they want the best of everything. They want to see new stuff. And in our element, what we're trying to do in the Kennedy Rooms is all about the story. We're trying to tell a story.
Yeah. That's interesting, Dermot. I know you've done work on calculating from a destinations perspective the value of different types of visitors, what John is referring to there.
Yeah.
Again, we're in the KPI territory, but how do you go about that kind of proactively targeting the high value visitors?
It was a pilot of a survey essentially where we measured 3 things of the visitors going to and from the Aran Islands. It was their expectations of, you know, what it would be versus their experience, and then did an expenditure diary. So it measured everything that they would have spent, everything from their ferry ticket or their plane ticket right down to they got a roll and a can of Coke or a bike or a tour or an Aran sweater or their accommodation, whatever. So from that then I was able to attribute their economic contribution to whatever market they came from, to be able to segment the market then and identify the most lucrative market for the businesses on the island to try and target. And when I worked through all of it, everything from your UK visitor to your French tour groups or, you know, a gang of students, the most lucrative of all of them were your typical Irish family, 2 adults, 2 kids. They were the ones who spent the most. By a factor, like, it was coming down with a multiplier effect, by a factor of 4 to 1 in comparison to all the others. Yeah. So it was just power for the community to know if they wish to invest in marketing, this is the type of marketing activity that you should engage in. So you know exactly what market to go after. You know exactly what market you should be going after. So why waste your energy on others if it's not economically viable? So if you have a market that's by a factor of 4 to 1 within 1 year, if you're able to convert, you know, maybe 1 or 2% of the visitors coming, already it's having an economic positive contribution on the community itself. So it's using a model to show, look, there's information there. If you gather it and analyze it correctly, you can very quickly find out, you know, what are the best markets to target.
It's interesting, and using the data to feed your marketing. Catherine, I know we've spoken about the marketing-led approach. Needs to be data-driven, but kind of the shortcomings of that marketing-led approach.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there are 2 types of destinations. There's destinations that don't have enough visitors, and there's destinations that have too many visitors. And they both sort of envy each other to a degree, although I imagine the ones that don't have enough visitors envy the ones with too many visitors far more, and get very frustrated about the problems that are faced. And they are real problems. But the situation is that marketing, to my mind, is the wrong place for a community to start, especially if they're at the beginning of their tourism journey. They have to start with product development, because if a visitor is coming to their destination and they cannot spend money in your destination, then they will be spending money somewhere else. And effectively, that's where it comes to people who day trip into a destination and their accommodation spend is somewhere else. We all know that the vast majority of money in tourism is made from where people stay overnight. So if there isn't an opportunity for people to stay in your area, if the accommodation stock isn't there, if the products for people to buy, if the tourism products there, if your product is your beautiful scenery and your wonderful welcome, you have to monetize that. You have to figure out a way to get some money from the tourists that are coming.
So you need to be ready for your visitors.
Absolutely.
Before we market.
And I really feel very strongly for those tourism destinations that are at the beginning of their tourism, or sort of a little bit further along. They need to be looking to make sure that they have the products that are going to be able to monetize that.
To do any of these things, like select your visitors or collaborate, like collaboration is the word that's lying behind all of what you say, particularly from a destination perspective. It needs a lot of different stakeholders, the communities, the businesses, policymakers, the marketeers might be outside your destination completely, for example. I know in your role in the Cliffs of Moher, you would have been right in the middle of collaborating with wide stakeholders all the time. Is there any easy and straightforward way to do that? To make collective decisions for the long term, for the legacy type
I suppose networking is essential. And I mean, if you get community groups, and when I say community groups, I'm talking about the people who are doing the business in the communities, as well as the community leaders, as well as the agencies working together, then their voice is much stronger, and it's easier for them to communicate with the outside actors, because that's the other issue that a lot of destinations face, is that it's not just the destination is a product not just for the people in that destination, it's a product for people outside of that destination who are seeing it as an opportunity to sell, especially those who are bringing people in, whether it's transport providers. Look at the low-cost carriers, the tour operators, the ferry companies, whoever it is that's bringing people into a destination. And
the community are not on their own.
And other destinations who see your tourism product as a way of selling their destination, saying you can access this tourism product. You can access the Wild Atlantic Way from Dublin, for example.
John?
Sorry, the other, to follow on that, the other element of that as well is that what I'm finding in our short history of this stuff is that the more discerning tourist is now looking for something very different. And if you go back to the marketing, that's why it leads off the marketing comment. If you have something that's very, very different, no matter what it is in your product, that's what they want. And it doesn't have to be for the volumes. It doesn't have to be a beautiful cliff on the side of the Wild Atlantic Way. It just has to be something unique and different. Because the modern tourist, Ireland isn't the cheapest country in the world to come to anymore. So therefore, the tourist that's coming here now has a bit more money to spend, and they want to see different things, and they want to see things that maybe that other people haven't seen, and that's not the major tourist attractions. So if you can provide something in your product that's actually, like we're doing, is creating a story, it does work and it does resonate and it does return revenue in a big way.
And that idea of telling your story and not being afraid to tell your story is important. Brings me on a bit to the question about what is different about Ireland. There's many different things, but repeatedly comes back to its culture, its heritage, its people. And in the whole sustainability side of things, what do we do to protect that? I'm gonna direct a question at you, Dermot. I know you're from the Gaeltacht. There's people here today from the Gaeltacht. I should have mentioned it earlier and I didn't. We've quite a crew from Connemara and areas that are starting out. But the Irish language and the Irish culture and the Irish welcome and all of those things, how do we protect those for the long term? How do we make them last?
Yeah, I suppose we're fortunate in a way that we don't have the sun like they do in the sun of Spain, because if we did, everybody would be here. Because of the fact that we have such a rich heritage and culture. If you think of the American visitor coming to Ireland, their history for their nation, as they know it, is very brief in comparison to ours, which is which goes, it goes millennia. So we have such a rich heritage product, along with the beautiful landscape, and then the people to go with it.
Yeah.
But as we're seeing such a continuation of migration from rural areas to the urban areas, and as a result, the fewer the people who are there in the rural areas, more that product is being diminished essentially. So for a resident of the Gaeltacht, the language is part and parcel of everyday life, so much so that I would have always described it as I always felt as though I had two identities. In the fact that when I'm in the Gaeltacht and I'm with my friends in the pub and we all speak Irish, I feel as though I'm in another world. And then during the summer on the Aran Islands, we always felt as though we were on stage to a degree, because we were putting on this kind of almost like a face, and we'd speak a lot more English. Obviously, there was more of an outside influence coming to and from the island. But again, they wanted still to hear the Irish in the pub later on in the evening. They still wanted to get a feel for that fabric of the island. And I remember growing up, there was this old sign as you walked down the pier in Kilronan, and it was like an old picture of the Aran Islands, and they said the custodians of the Irish way of life was written on it. And growing up, I certainly recognised that, but now looking on it as it is at the moment, we've lost more and more of it. We've lost a lot of our identity, and the influence of tourism has certainly, played a big part in that. So it's important to recognise what's important, when it comes to the identity of the community, and how tourism can have an impact on it, both in a negative and a positive way.
Yeah, it's interesting, because what prompted me to ask that question was talking about difference, and it's one of our huge differences. But tourism can either dilute it or enhance it, and I suppose I don't think we'll have the answer today, but how do we ensure those things are enhancers of tourism and are enhanced by tourism as well? I know we're very short in time, and I have one question to throw to the whole panel. It was mentioned, I think, by Caroline as well, but this idea of a career in tourism. How do we make this industry an industry that's attractive for people from straight out, from graduate level, who see a long-term future in it for themselves? Again, back to the idea of destinations and an industry that will last. Any ideas?
Well, I think we have to take a lot of pride in tourism as a professional career. I think there's a little bit too much focus on the fact that it's too much talk about it being seasonal, about being low paid, etc. There are basically that means it is an easy career to enter, because people can start it at a very early stage, and a lot of people do start their career in tourism at their first job as a holiday job or something along those lines. But there is a huge gamut of different kinds of skill sets that are needed by the tourism industry and that are used by the tourism industry. And I think the thing that makes me love it is that there's huge variety. It's great fun. You're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people from all over the world, so you have that mind-opening sharing of cultures opportunity that comes place, and then you're also celebrating your own place as part of that. So I think I think we need to be very proud of tourism as a professional career, and I think we need to be singing from the rafters about that to people who are considering their careers. And it's opportune now. People are filling out their CAO forms at the moment. I think we see it as a profession, see it as a career.
See it as a profession, yeah. I'm really conscious of our time now. Have you something to add, or Danny?
Well, it's interesting, very briefly, in the heights of the recession, our numbers in GMIT from the hospitality perspective were through the roof. And
yes.
Now that the economy is flying, it's the other way around, and people are asking why. Well, the main reason for it is because of the fact that it's low skill based at entry level, and generally at that level, the pay is quite low. The security of tenure isn't really there, and when you're looking for housing and there's high turnover, the practical side of it right now is very, very difficult for any tourism operator trying to find skilled staff, because of the fact that if you're on a low wage and trying to find somewhere affordable to live, that's incredibly challenging. But the other side of it is, when we're selling the career from an education perspective, the key thing that we always say is that it is a passport to travel the world. And that's really important, and we're seeing now with the Ryanair generation, that I suppose I'm part of, have come home with, their international experience, are now adding back into our own communities again. So it's key to have to continue to sell it, but still be able to deal with the practical side of it at the moment.
These are all topics we could probably talk about.
Just very quickly, I think it's from people joining the industry, it's so important from the people who are hiring those people is to look for people that get it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. That you don't want people who are looking for a job. And it goes back to the HR speaker earlier. If they're the right profile, right people, and how we train those and how we educate those at the beginning through their college, through their education, is that if they don't get it, they're not going to enjoy it, and they're not going to develop and grow within it, and they're not going to help me develop and grow or anybody else.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks very much. I'm sure there might be people in the audience with questions. Is there?
Hi, Joan here from Doolin to Iron Ferries. We've actually probably answered a lot of it, and I think one of the key learnings I'm getting from today is the whole importance of people and getting the right people. And my question is to Dermot, have you noticed a difference in the type of people that are coming into your section in tourism and for the training compared to years ago? Has it changed much over the years?
Massively, and the big change is the fact that very few of them have experience at all. So my generation, when I studied in Shannon College, I'd say 80% of us had worked in some shape or form in tourism, and very few of the students who come in have worked at all in terms of any summer jobs. So that's one key thing. And then when they go in and they start working in the environment, and in particular when they do their first placement, it's a big shock to them because they haven't actually worked. So that's one area where we get a big fall off with students. Yes, so that's probably one of the biggest challenges I see, where the work ethic isn't there, but it's not their fault because they just haven't had that chance, I guess, to a degree, or they haven't put themselves forward to go for. But there are a lot of employers who won't take a 16-year-old on and for the summer months. So there's that other challenge as well.
I just have a question for all of you. What would you suggest for a region to come up with a policy or to enhance stay another night?
It's all about the experience. You already have the inn, which is the Wild Atlantic Way, that gets a lot of people there first head.
Or Ireland's HDs.
Or Ireland's HDs. Well, I'm thinking more as well. It's to try and create, what we're trying to do with our stuff is we're trying to get them to engage a lot more, engage in the story, engage for an afternoon tea, a dinner, and then stay the night. So it's just to capture them. It's not an easy question to answer, because everybody's going to have a different answer to it anyway. But it's the experience, to give them an experience that they don't want to leave. Very short story. It's very short. We had some American clients recently, and when they came to Bruff, we took them to Loch Gur, right? In Loch Gur, Stone's Great Circle, if anybody knows it. I couldn't get them to leave it. Now, to anyone that's seen it, it's just 24 stones in a circle in the field with cows, right? We sometimes undervalue the stuff that's right in front of our nose, right? To me, and I said to Don and the lads there from Ballyhara, that the big capture thing for us in the Ballyhara region is the Grange Stone Circle, 6,000 years old. It's older than the pyramids and older than Stonehenge, and totally undermarketed, undersold. Anytime you take a tourist there, they want to walk around it, they want to touch it. They stay there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And we sometimes don't sell what's right in front of our face as being the capture thing that gets people to do it.
And I think it's basically, don't underestimate the importance of promotion to your local community and within your local community and within the tourism community, so that other people know what you're doing, you know what they're doing, and because effectively you're the gatekeepers to the visitor, and once one of you has a visitor, you can then promote the rest of your area to that visitor and to their wider audience as well, because they're all sharing everything they do.
Connecting things up for the visitor.
Absolutely.
Great.
And to get them to stay another night, you could also just hide their car keys.
Sorry, can I just get a...
No, I was just going to use the example of the Burren Bridge, because if you look at now, you guys have given the visitors so many reasons to stay overnight, whereas if you go back to 10 or 15 years ago, the reasons were there to a large degree, but they mightn't have known about it. So it's coming back to what John and Catherine said. You have to give them the reasons to want to stay overnight and communicate it to them properly.
You can't expect them to find it.
Yeah.
Anthony Gray from Malabon and Hooked and Sligo Food Trail. And just maybe a note of caution, I just want to get your opinion on it. Are you a bit fearful for the way things are going at the moment with the new VAT rate, the minimum wage, and obviously the fluctuation in sterling? And I'm just worried that are we going back to maybe 2007 and figures where Ireland was uncompetitive? And I am personally fearful for tourism and the way it's going, and I do hope that I'm completely wrong, but I just wanted to get your opinion on it.
Can I give you a quick one on that? I think the tourists are changing, and it's not forced change from our side. It's changing because they're more discerning and they're higher level. The volume is dropping, which we talked. The volume of people is dropping, but their spend is increasing. That's what I think, anyway. That's my opinion on it.
A lot of it is very much dependent on where you're situated, obviously, in the country. So, for example, if you're a hotel in Leitrim, 45% of your business might be coming from over the border, it's definitely a larger consideration for you there than if you're a pub in Doolin, for example. And so there are localised considerations without a shadow of a doubt. I think while the UK visitor numbers for Ireland went up in 2018, the rate of increase just slowed a little bit. The spend went down, but again, I suppose we're seeing that the spend in comparison with the US market is 3 or 4 times as much when they're here versus the UK market. I think though that on the long term, the UK really like the Irish product, and I don't think that that's going to change. I don't think that all of a sudden they're going to like an entirely different destination. I think that we just need to be smart about how we're communicating our product to them. We may have to change how we communicated in the past due to the fact that they're going to be slightly more price sensitive without a shadow of a doubt. And we're going to have to be a lot more aware of fluctuations in currency and wider economic considerations that may come down to a small little hotel situated near the border in Leitrim. So I suppose it's being a little bit more aware of those kind of factors. Yeah.
And tourism as a global industry is very much a growth industry. Despite the recession, 10 out of the last 12 years have been growth years in tourism. So diversification away from the British market is not a bad thing for the Irish market. We were over-dependent on that particular market. I think Dermot is right. I don't think the English are going to, or the British are going to abandon us completely. It is going to be, the sterling differentials are going to be a factor, but we've seen how the US market is incredibly buoyant because Ireland is seen as such a safe destination. Yes, probably, we do know the industry goes through cycles, and there will be a period of time ahead where we will go through another difficult period, but it tends to go in cycles like that, and we are on an upward trajectory.
Okay, we'll take one final question. There's one not too far away. Gentleman there, who is quite far away. Hopefully he'll sing a song till I get to him. There you are, sir.
Hi, Mario Sobotes. I have 2 questions. John, you're a long time in business, and you mentioned 82% of your business is dependent of Adair Manor. How did you sustain your business when Adair Manor was closed for 18 months? And another question to Dermot, how do you actually attract people to take their career in hospitality?
Okay, just very quickly, we are only open since last November. So we were developing and building our business model and our strategy while Adair Manor was closed. But we were already working with the agents in the UK, the US and in Dublin to bring in those customers in up to 2022.
But you were in the business before that. You
No,
were working with Adair Manor.
We're an event management company, but we weren't tied to Adair Manor. We still do work in Dromoland, Ashford and Shelburne and stuff as well. But the Adair Manor is our core business for the Kennedy rooms.
Yeah, to follow up on that question, so we 2 types of students who come to us. One have come from a background of tourism and hospitality, so that there's some form of background in the family. They know what they're getting into. Their family know what they're getting into. So we don't generally have to sell it to them, but it's the students who have no background in it that we really struggle to sell it to. And the main reason why we struggle is that a lot of that planning stage when it comes to CAO happens in school with guidance counsellors. And the guidance counsellors are very much influenced with trends when it comes to overall employment in an industry. So right now the trend is very much towards science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And in that there's a lot of security of tenure. So if you end up getting a job with Facebook or Google, you have almost your accommodation, your health insurance, all of those things that you might not have from the outset in the tourism hospitality industry. So we're competing with that rhetoric from guidance counsellors. So we have to actively go out to guidance counsellors to try and change that message. That takes a huge amount of work. We host guidance counsellors in the region every year to try and communicate the message to them properly. But it's a huge challenge. And then when kids go home to their parents and say, I'm interested in becoming a chef, and then when they look at the market and if the parents might see, okay, they might be able to achieve 400 plus in their leaving cert, you're not going to be a chef. You should be aiming for something else, because it's a very much points focused mentality when it comes to that decision making stage for an 18-year-old. And we've one really good example a number of years ago. We had a student who came in, he had 585 points off the leaving cert, wanted to do chefing. He fell out with his parents as a result because they wanted him to go to Trinity and to do medicine. but he's now he's won awards on a European level because of his ability in chefing. He just followed his passion. So he was a great example of you don't need 500 points on the Leaving Cert or 200 points to be focused on a technical side of one aspect of the industry. It's about getting the message out to prospective students that it's slightly different. It's more people focused. Any employer will tell you that 80% of the time that they're employing somebody, it's 80% of it is on personality. The other 20% is the skills and the experience. So it's trying to get that kind of message to the kids basically. But we have to do it indirectly as well through the schools. So it's a big challenge.
Okay, thanks very much to Dermot, John and Catherine. We'll take a break there before Johnny, 2 questions, ask another one. Only supposed to get 1 question, you grab 2 of them.